The investigation also retrieved data from the suspect's cell phones with numerous photos and videos showing the abuse.
I've given fear a place in my life. I've given confusion control of my mind. I've chosen to submit and bow my knee to lies from the mouth of my enemy. Oh, I can feel my mind losing control.
I would like to discuss two heartbreaking stories today. Both are breaking child cases. One is about a mother who puts her 1-month-old baby in an oven. The other story is a heartbreaking story of a mom, dad, and grandma that were legal guardians of a 10-year-old little girl. And they ended up torturing her to death, basically, and she ended up dying from their abuse. They're both heartbreaking, so before we begin, I'm just going to let you know viewer discretion is advised on both of these. So here we go. The first case involves Mariah Thomas, a 26-year-old woman from Kansas City who supposedly accidentally put her 1-month-old baby, Zariah Mae Thomas, in the oven instead of her crib for a nap. Don't ask me how that happens. By the way, before it gets started, my name is Holly. Welcome to the Murder She Shed. If you like to hear breaking cases and rarely told true crime cases, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let's get right on into this case. Mariah Thomas lived with her parents in the Manheim Park neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. When Mariah's parents left Mariah and Zariah on the morning of February 9th, which actually happened to be Mariah's birthday, they said she seemed in good spirits and everything just seemed normal. Zariah's grandfather received a call from Mariah at around 1 p.m. on Friday, in which she told him something was wrong with the baby and he needed to return home quickly. He was actually out job hunting. I guess he had lost his job. The mother was at work and he was out job hunting. So he quickly returned and he opened the door to smell smoke. Can you imagine what an awful smell that would have been? I imagine it is a smell this poor grandfather will carry with him the rest of his life. After he went to Zariah's crib, he realized Zariah was dead and smelled of smoke. She was wearing a bodysuit over a diaper, and the bodysuit had actually melted into the diaper and into her little flesh. It appeared black and dirty, and there was actually a burnt blanket laying beside the child. This is heartbreaking. Considering I'm fixing to be a grandma, this breaks my heart to tell this story. Mariah told her father that she had went to put Zariah down for a nap and accidentally put her in the oven instead of the crib. He immediately called authorities. On Mariah's Facebook is post after post about her being a mother. January 5th, she posted, "My daughter is really a blessing to me. Also, I just love being a mother. I wouldn't trade it for nothing in the world. January 9th, my daughter is really beautiful. January 10th, my daughter be looking for me. She really loves her mother. Also January 10th, me and my daughter's bond is so close and I'm loving it. January 13th, I'm a mother first, so don't ever question my motherhood. January 20th, she seemed to be upset about her friends not checking on her and only caring about her anyway because she had a baby. January 30 and 31st, some pictures of Zariah. The last picture is from February 9th, Mariah's birthday. And the day she put Zariah in the oven in the exact clothes that probably melted onto this little baby's body. I can't imagine the pain this little baby must have been in. Just you imagine the screams that would have come from that house. I have heard that Mariah may have been suffering from postpartum depression, and I have also heard she might have had schizophrenia. Mariah's friend has said that Mariah has been on medication for a mental illness since childhood and went off her medication while she was pregnant, and then did not, after she had the baby, she did not continue taking the medicine. Okay, let's say she did mistake an oven for a crib. If she did that, still doesn't explain why the oven was turned on. You don't turn on cribs. I mean, how do you accidentally push the on button and set it to a degree and push back, all while not knowing exactly what you were doing and it was accident? People are trying to excuse her because of her mental illness. It's just hard to forgive somebody. I don't care what kind of mental illness they had when it comes to a little bitty baby. During Mariah's police interview, she was smart enough to not say anything. and asked for a lawyer. So she was obviously lucid at that point. Even if she was suffering from a mental illness, she was smart enough to know I shouldn't say anything. I have rights here. So take your guess on what you think, if she knew what she was doing or not. She now has been charged for allegedly causing the death of her little 1-month-old baby. She is being held on a $200,000 cash bond. I mean, what is your opinion in this case? Leave a comment below. Could drug abuse been involved in this case, or did she just snap because it was her birthday and she's just tired of all the attention being on just the baby and she wanted attention on herself? I'm not saying that a mental illness couldn't be involved in this case, and it would have to be for you to do such a cruel thing. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around. I don't want to think of that as an excuse, because a lot of people have mental illnesses. A lot of people have schizophrenia and postpartum depression, but they don't stick their baby in an oven and turn it on and say it was an accident. I know you probably have your opinion too, and I'd like to hear it. The next breaking case is about 10-year-old Geanna Bradley from Hawaii, who died from starvation, blunt force injury due to assault, pneumonia, and a part of her nose was actually gone from the abuse that she suffered from. Geanna lived with Brandy and Thomas Blas, who actually were her legal guardians, and DEBRA GERON, who is identified as a non-biological grandmother. DEBRA GERON's husband also lived in this house. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. You're going to find out that, 10 people lived there. That's a lot of people in a 3-bedroom. DEBRA and her husband are actually Brandy's parents, so they lived with them in this house. Geanna had lived with this family since she was 2 years old, and the Blas were appointed legal guardians of her in 2018. The Blas had 6 children living in the home at 33 Kirsten. 4 of those children was actually their bio children, 14, 10, 5, and 3. And then they adopted a 4-year-old male. And then, of course, Geanna, 10-year-old Geanna, also lived in the house. So that's 10 people in this 3-bedroom home. So to begin with, it's a very crowded environment. DEBRA, the grandmother, said on January 18th, she went to wake Geanna and her siblings up around 6 a.m. that morning when she heard Geanna snoring. So she just left her sleeping. The other children, she said, was already awake and moving around. So she just went ahead and got them out of bed. Of course, she left Geanna sleeping. Later in the morning, she returned to the room and noticed Geanna's mouth was open. Chest was not moving and she couldn't feel a heartbeat. DEBRA called in Brandy Blas and they began CPR and called 911. Paramedics and officers arrived at the home around 8:20 that morning and realized Geanna was deceased, stating she was already cold stiff and appeared to have been dead around 2 or 3 hours. They observed multiple scratch-like marks around her ears, eyes, top of her forehead, cheeks, and around the left side of her lip area. Above and below her eyelids appeared to be slightly bruised, and her chin appeared to have a road rash injury. She also had open sores on her body and unhealthy teeth. One of the most significant injuries was that half of her nose was actually gone, missing. Police would later find out that Brandy, Thomas, and DEBRA were actually texting each other after they came there, and those messages were later erased. And I'm wondering if they were trying to get together on what they were saying, how these injuries occurred on her body. That's what it makes me think. They were trying to connive a plan of what they were going to say when questioned. In the police interview, Brandy stated that Geanna had been diagnosed by a doctor with ADHD, as well as possibly suffering from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. She was given medications by this doctor, and she saw a psychologist once a month. Brandy also added that Geanna would throw big tantrums daily and just throw herself on the ground, causing injuries to herself if she did not get her way. She explained all the injuries to her body had happened because of her throwing these tantrums, and the nose injury, she said, was due to a bicycle wreck. DEBRA told officers the injury to the nose was caused from January 6th, when she had actually taken all the children to the park. While she was playing games on her phone, the children were riding bicycles in the park. And during this time, Geanna had a bike wreck, fell sideways, and hit her nose on the bike handlebar. She stated she took the children home, not to the hospital. Nope, not at all. Half of her nose is missing, but I'm just going to take her home and just stick some gauze and ointment on her nose. That's all she did. She then said to officers, I didn't take her to the hospital because there was nothing really bad about it, just a kid running around and got injured. I mean, only half of her nose was missing, and this was her response. If that was my child, I would have freaked out. Wouldn't a normal grandmother hurry to the emergency room as fast as she could? I mean, I would if that was my grandchild. I would be worried about if it could be repaired. Her facial features could be repaired before it was too late. I mean, I'd be worried about the blood loss. I'd be worried that it's a permanent scar, you know. I can't imagine not worrying about that and just taking the child home. And nobody worrying about it. Never seeing the doctor about this nose issue. Considering the story is more than likely all made up, I suppose it doesn't really matter what she did afterwards. Brandy also told officers Geanna was not allowed sweets, caffeine, and chocolate, and they had her on a ketogenic diet. She said she was taken out of school during the COVID pandemic and was being homeschooled. Here we go again, homeschooled again. But this time, I guess there was no signs from teachers that she's being abused. A lot of times teachers see the abuse and then they pull them out and homeschool them, and I don't know how that's allowed. This time I guess she didn't have any signs of abuse beforehand. Geanna also had not been to a doctor in 3 years. One of the bio children was told by Brandy to tell officers that Geanna was well taken care of and fed, even though she was mean to her siblings. All of the bio children were healthy and had no injuries, and were made to lie by Brandy about how good of parents they were. Officers spoke to Geanna's third grade teacher before she had been homeschooled, and she stated that she had not observed Geanna to have any behavior issues nor any acts of active defiance, just normal third grade behaviors. She also did not see any indication of behaviors that would make her think Geanna engaged in self-harm. DEBRA's phone was examined, and on the phone was an image of what appears to be a video surveillance monitor. The image on the monitor is Geanna standing in a fenced area wearing some type of blindfold over her eyes. Geanna is wearing a pink long sleeve shirt and dark pants. Also an image of a VTech baby monitor device. On the screen of the device, it depicts Geanna in a small enclosed space with a box covering her face and head. There's a white bucket next to her, and it is unclear of the position of her hands and arms on that video. There's also an image of what appears to be Geanna bound duct tape in a small enclosed area. And this area, we would later learn, is actually like an enclosed front porch area. Geanna has duct tape around her arms and torso, binding them to her sides, and her hands are behind her back. Geanna's eyes have a black covering duct tape taped to her head. The duct tape is wrapped around her eyes and forehead area, as well as over the top of her head. In this image, Geanna is wearing a yellow crop top shirt with no sleeves and lavender bottoms. There are apparent injuries to her shoulders and lower face, including an image of what appears to be the 4-year-old adopted male child strapped in a car seat. His eyes are closed, and there is what appears to be vomit on his face, the car seat, and the ground near the top of the car seat. Then on Brandy's, more horrifying images were found on her cell phone. A video of a violent interaction was found between what appears to be Geanna and Thomas, her husband. Geanna is sitting on the floor in a room when Thomas just walks in and just kicks her in the head for no apparent reason. Then after that, Thomas then throws a stack of papers towards Geanna saying, "Watch your mouth," and then "Fix your effing papers." I'm not sure exactly what that means. Also an image of what appears to be Geanna wearing a long sleeve purple shirt with some type of yellow covering over her head. The yellow covering is then wrapped with duct tape around Geanna's head. She appears to be in that same enclosed porch area. Literally, she had something yellow over her head and is wrapped on with duct tape. Poor child probably couldn't even breathe. And he's kicking her and beating her. Just disgusting. Then in another image, Geanna appears standing while facing the wall with a bucket in front of her. Also in front of her, Thomas is standing. Between the days of May 11, 2023 and January 18, 2024, Brandy and DEBRA participated in a series of text messages which appear to reference Geanna and instructions for Thomas to take certain actions. And here are some of the instructions to Thomas. Ignore her. To put Geanna's hands a certain way, clean out her toilet or bucket, and to check on her and the box in which she was sleeping, to deny or limit food and water, tie her up and punish her by physical force, feeding her food that was expired or almost expired, wake her up if she fell asleep when she was supposed to be standing, even though they were restricting her food, and feeding her expired food. They were making money off of her. On their bank statement, it shows that they were actually receiving almost $2,000 a month to take care of Geanna, if you call it taking care of her. They were basically just profiting off of this little girl. There was some recovered text messages between Brandy, DEBRA, and Thomas that demonstrates agreements and plans regarding the purchase of various foods and eating out at restaurants. When they went in to search the home, they would see that the family possessed a sufficient food supply to feed that many people. But Geanna and the 4-year-old had signs of starvation. Thomas at times was also instructed to put a box over her head and keep her quiet when visitors were in the house, having her sleep in a box and shooting her. It is not clear what Thomas would be shooting her with, but I would say it could possibly be referring to drugs. The alternative is bad too, so whichever way, it's bad. Both DEBRA and Brandy would monitor Geanna's movements from their cell phones via a surveillance monitor. And then they would tell Thomas exactly what to do, which actually this reminds me of the last case I did, where the mother was abusing the little boy, sticking him in the closet, and she was texting the older son while she was at work to do what she wanted him to do. And this case kind of reminds me of that case. This guy was getting the text too. So I'm assuming he didn't work and he stayed home with all the children. On August 2020, which appeared to be the last time Geanna was taken to the doctor, Thomas had taken her and he received texts from Brandy asking if the doctor could tell how she actually received those injuries. Brandy texted him, like pretend, act fatherly, so he wouldn't suspect those injuries were caused from abuse. A child abuse pediatrician and the ME both said Geanna's death was consistent with fatal starvation, prominent joints, prominent ribs, generalized loss of subcutaneous fat, sunken eyes, and muscle atrophy. Photos also indicate multiple, too numerous to count, of wounds all over her body, as well as her 2 front teeth were broken. Geanna's back was covered with many scars and wounds. Most significant was a deep wound at the base of her spine that appeared so deep the bone was actually visible. Her spine was visible. There was a concentration of wounds all along the spine, and this was consistent with abuse. It could not have been an accident that happened to this child's spine. The various stages of healing indicates repeated injury to the back. The adopted 4-year-old suffered from failure to thrive and had numerous injuries and scars on his body as well. Bruising to his lower back in 4 spots. Bruising to his upper back in 2 spots near his shoulder blades. Slight bruising to the back of his ears. Small bruises to his arms, scratches to his body and his hands and feet, and what appears to be human bite marks on his right thigh. He also suffered from psychological deprivation. No attention, probably just sat in that car seat, confined to that car seat, and given no attention whatsoever. He looked like he couldn't even walk properly. He looked like a toddler when he walked. Even though he was 4 years old, it looked like he was in the first stages of walking. Brandy, Thomas, Blas, and DEBRA were arrested February 8th. They had to get together the evidence that this was actually abuse first, because they kept saying she had this accident and that accident. But after they got all their information together, they arrested them on February 8th. All 3 are charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. DEBRA's husband was not arrested. He does not seem to be involved in the abuse. I'm wondering if he didn't have some kind of health issues and Maybe he was confined to bed, and so therefore he had nothing to do with the abuse. The adopted boy and the couple's 4 biological children were actually placed in the custody of CWS. So this little adopted boy actually survived, and that is a good positive in this situation, because he probably would have ended up just like Geanna. Sadly, Geanna had to lose her life in order to save this 4-year-old little boy. And it's sad that it wasn't caught quicker. If we would just start in our own community and watch out for children that are around us, this is one way that we can stop the abuse. Don't say that's none of my business. That's not, these people down the road, they're none of my business. You see kids that do not look like they're taken care of, kids that have bruises on them. Don't say that's none of my business. You get involved. You get involved. Even if you have to turn these people in over and over again, do it. Because sometimes, it takes a community. Sometimes it takes neighbors and the police and CWS all working together to try to help these children. And I'd like to say, rest in peace, little Geanna. You now have your angel wings. This is bye, and he loves y'all. And he hopes y'all are having a great week. Bye.
I've given fear a place in my life. I've given confusion control of my mind. I've chosen to submit and bow my knee to lies from the mouth of my enemy. Oh, I can feel my mind losing control.